mother's family was 5 generations deep. 5 generations all alive at the same time. Some of those people lived well over 100 years. Their stories and the stories they told of their grandparents' were part of a 5,000-year-old oral tradition. By the time I was 7, I was saving up stories that had been in the family for generations. I became a reliquary. I would guard and preserve those stories for the generations to come. And when I grew up, I was going to be one of those old storytellers. I soaked up random memories from my grandma's childhood in Russia, my dad's memories of his long years at the orphanage, my great-grandmother's tale of her youngest child, my grandma's little brother Georgie, running off to be a gangster, which I later realized was how my mother and father eventually met each other, but that's another story. At the family table, it was understood that nobody under the minimum age of 40 had anything to say of any remotest interest or importance. Shut up and listen, you'll learn something. Those old people had outlived the pogroms, the post-World War I influenza epidemic, the Great Depression, Hitler. They had survived to tell the tales. So would I. Early on, I was aware of creating the old storyteller character I would be when I grew up. I had lots of wonderful role models just among my mother's mishpucha, very old musicians who played forever. I still have the violin that belonged to my grandfather's grandfather, David. Very old singers of songs from 100 years past. I still remember all those Russian and Yiddish songs that belonged to my grandmother's Grandma Masha. They had their way of doing old age, and someday that would be me. Kamaya, Sadu Yagadamali, Kamalin Kamaya, Kalin Kagalin Kamaya, Sadu Yagadamali, Kamalin Kamaya. Poets of Sinayu, poets and Spot Polyrgia Vimenia. Spot Polyrgia Vimenia. Kamaya, Sadu Yagadamali, Kamaya, Kali, Kamaya, Sadu Yagadamali, Kamaya. Sinayu, Zelanayu, Spasparjitia Vimenia. Spasparjitia Kamaya. I never knew him as a young man. I don't think it would have mattered much. He was eternally youthful. He was gregarious. He was a true bon vivant. He loved to laugh. He made terrible puns. And he wrote heartfelt, inept poetry to my mother. It was Bashir. He would become an attorney. That man loved to argue. He once sued the United States government and won. But baseball was his life. He learned to play baseball before he was 5 years old in the orphanage, and he kept it up as long as he possibly could. He finally had to give up the game when he was 87 years old. The next decade was sad. Once he couldn't play ball, he just didn't know what to do with himself besides bringing lox and bagels to the bedsides of old friends who couldn't remember who he was. I saw that if you hadn't prepared, old age could kill you. So I've been preparing. Time has worn away the sharp corners and the sharp edges and smoothed out the rocky terrain that was a younger Penny. I'm colorful and eccentric now instead of weird. I realize I haven't been in a fist fight in almost 20 years. P.S. I always fought above my weight class. Yeah, you don't want to mess with me. Cinderella has become the fairy godmother. Sometimes from here I look back on that younger me and I remind her who she'll be when the scars are healed, when the back against a wall fight to the death has ended in survival, when the foolish, forever life-altering choice has given its inevitable result. Even if I didn't know all the details of that strange journey to this future me, I'm about where I expected to be, even if it wasn't always the shortest route. This is September. This is the harvest. For the longest time, I've been fashioning a ball gown for this final dance, stitching together choice bits from the rag bag of my long life, of my ancestors' long lives, of what maybe could have been my mother's life. By the age of 28, my mother had been married for 6 years and had 4 children. She had left college to drive trucks for the Army during World War II. The war had been a good excuse. She was having a rough time with pre-med. My grandpa dreamed that his only child could become a doctor, but she dreamed of being a dancer. She headed west from Ohio to Los Angeles to stay at her grandparents' house and work in her Uncle Georgie's store near the Army base. She, she took ballet lessons 4 nights a week, and on weekends, she would pour punch and coffee at the USO Club, and she danced. All the soldiers wanted to dance with my beautiful, graceful mother. She didn't waste any time. She finagled an audition for the Earl Carroll Vanities in Hollywood. Now, the audition notice specified showgirls, minimum height 5'7". Mom was barely 5'1", but she knew she couldn't miss. She looked like Barbara Stanwyck, and she danced like Rita Hayworth. She spent a week's pay on a new outfit, got her nails done in a swanky salon, got her hair and makeup just right. She floated off the bus on Sunset Boulevard and glided through the stage door into the Earl Carroll Theater in Hollywood. Too short, next! She was heartbroken, and she never went on another audition. Years later, she did get another shot at it. She was offered the chance to dance the lead in a show her ballet master, Nico Charisse, who was the first husband and the mentor of Sid Charisse, he was taking a show to Vegas, and he offered her the lead, to dance the lead. She didn't take the gig because at the time, she was pregnant with me. Marriage and children came first. I remember watching Fred Astaire and Ginger Rogers movies with her on TV. Before I could even dress myself, I knew I was going to squander my life on Busby Berkeley's vision of heaven. Like Ruby Keeler in 42nd Street, I was a little trooper. I would never quit. I would never give up. No sacrifice was too great if at the end of everything, I could be up there in the light when the curtain opened. Broadway audiences would fall at my feet. As I blazed up the great white way, true love would materialize, and we would dance in each other's arms. Music up, curtain, thunderous applause. I should have paid a little more attention to those scenes in Stage Door where middle-aged actresses find themselves alone in boarding houses, and the girl who doesn't get the part throws herself out the window. Oh, we'll get back to that. Fast forward. At 23, I left Los Angeles and moved into my New York City apartment to go to Juilliard. Oh, that apartment, some of you saw it. The bathtub squatted against the wall in the one room of a cockroach-infested tenement, top of a 5-floor walk-up in a terrible neighborhood near the East River. There was a steam radiator in the corner. The toilet was in a tiny closet under a big cracked tank that dripped orange-brown water stains down a peeling wall. Up under the 100-year-old roof, the ceiling leaked filthy rainwater all over all my stuff whenever the precipitation lasted more than an hour. But the rent was $44.16 a month. It meant I never had to wait tables. I never had to work in an office. You wait tables, you're a waitress. You work in an office, you're a secretary. You strum a guitar and sing on the street, you're a performing artist. Gradually, my natural shyness faded a bit, and I began to have real confidence in my ability to kick the crap out of the smaller muggers. Confidence is a good thing to have if you're an actor, because show business is not for the faint-hearted. The auditions are murder. The face is okay, but God, that hair! Next! Too tall, too short, next! Too fat, too thin, too young, too old, next! But I was a little trooper. I would hang in there and give it all I had. I decided, if nothing had come of it, by the time I was 35, I would do something else. Years passed, and one evening, it all came crashing down. It had been raining all day, and the ceiling was leaking badly. I had put pots and pans around the apartment to catch the drips. I draped a tarp over my bed. I'd been rehearsing in front of the full-length mirror for yet another humiliating audition, for yet another stupendous part I wasn't going to get. Dirty rainwater dripped on my head. All of a sudden, I couldn't kid myself. It was hopeless. I promised myself I was going to hang in there until I was 35. I was only 28. I had 7 more years of this. parents' house. Mom, I can't do this anymore. I want to come home. But this was your dream. Please, Mom, I'm so lonely. Please, Mom, tell me to come home. There was dead silence, and then, no. And she hung up. 7 more years. The apartment building was only 5 stories high, so forget throwing myself out the window. I lit some candles in a memorial to the career that would never be. I took a last look in the mirror at the okay face that would never play the palace. A trick of light from the burning candles and a silent movie seemed to flicker. Broadway audiences fell at my feet. As I blazed up the great white way, true love materialized, and we danced in each other's arms. Music up, curtain, thunderous applause. I promised myself I would hang in there, and by God, I would. 6 more months passed while I continued to take acting and singing and dancing lessons. I went on audition after audition after audition. And by the time I was 29, I was singing principal soprano roles at New York City Opera and playing leads off-Broadway. When I made my Broadway debut, my mother sat next to my dad and my sister Tammy, 8th row center. I stopped the show with my big song. Afterwards, in my dressing room, I could see my mother's pride, but I saw something else. Regret. And I understood why she hadn't let me give up and go home. To try and fail is to know at least you tried. To fail to try is never to know what might have been. Bei mein Kindeswiegen steht der chlorweiße Ziege, des Ziegeleis gefahren handeln. Das wird sein dein Baum, Rosenkäse mit Mandeln. Schlaf, mein Kinderschlaf, la la la, 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 la 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 la, la la la, la la. Rosenkäse mit Mandeln. Schlaf, mein Kinder, schlaf. That lullaby is a kind of mitochondrial DNA. My grandma sang it to me and my siblings. Her grandma Masha sang it to her. That whole gang left the shtetl of Kremenchuk, a Jewish ghetto near Minsk, around 1910 when grandma was a little girl. The Cossacks had made it clear it was time for them to go. For a while they lived in Brooklyn. A lot of Jewish musicians were making very good money at that time in show business. My great-grandmother saw that as the road out of the shtetl, and she pushed her kids into music lessons. My grandma turned out to be a piano prodigy. One time, the young Irving Berlin, who who happened to be dating the girl upstairs, came into the apartment to listen to my 8-year-old grandma play the piano. Grandma was 11 when she got her first paid gig, playing the piano in her uncle's silent movie house. She would sit on her little stool and watch the movies and play music to accompany whatever was going on up there on the screen, while mice would run across the top of her piano. Grandma's older sister, Helen, took singing lessons. And by the time she was 12, she was warbling opera arias from Donizetti's Lucia di Lammermoor in the Gus Edwards Revue on Broadway. But when it came time for the national tour, her mother would not let her pretty little preteen daughter head off on the road with those low-life showbiz types. Helen never got over the disappointment. Years later, she did get another shot at it. She was offered the chance to sing the lead in Lakme at the Detroit Opera. She didn't take the gig because, at the time, she was pregnant with my mother's cousin Joby. Marriage and children came first. These stories are my heirlooms. Here's another. My grandfather's grandfather, David, during the pogroms, after the assassination of Tsar Nicholas II, he was exiled to Siberia. Well, of course he escaped. He wrapped his feet in rags and he headed south over the frozen tundra, armed only with a big stick and a knife he'd managed to make out of a rusty metal bucket. At some point along his trek, he befriended an orphan bear cub. By the time they had walked all the way to Turkey, the bear was fully grown and could dance and do tricks, and David earned enough money to get back home. He'd been gone for 3 years. At first, they thought he was a ghost. Fucking horror. David died in Toledo, Ohio, at the age of 108. Of accidental poisoning. But that's another story. I inherited his violin. I heard his son, my great-grandfather Samuel, play it in his barbershop, the only time I ever met him, when my mom took us all to Toledo. That violin came to me because out of that whole long line on both sides of my mother's family, I'm the only musician left. I am the only branch of the family tree that never married, that never had children. That's a Jewish woman's prime directive. She's just not quite kosher without marriage and children. Then again, I am the keeper of the law. After more than 100 years, I'm the only one who still vividly remembers the shtetl of Kremenchuk, and the hoofbeats, and the sun glinting off the shiny blood-stained sabers the day the Cossacks rode in to kill everyone. I'm the only one left to tell the stories and sing the songs, unless Rowan will pick up the torch. Well, maybe, you know what? I'm going to teach you one, so you maybe pass this on. So, it's a pretty simple song. It's one of the oldest and most beloved of the Yiddish folk songs. So your lines are, number 1, Tumbala, tumbala, tumbala laika. Second line, Tumbala, tumbala, tumbala laika. Third line, Tumbala laika, spiel bala laika. Fourth line, Tumbala laika, spiel bala laika. So it goes like, Tumbala, tumbala, tumbala laika. Tumbala, tumbala, tumbala laika. Tumbala laika, spiel bala laika. Tumbala laika. Now I'm going to sing the verse. I want that clear. And then you'll join me on the chorus. Everybody sing it. Tumbala, 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 laika. Tumbala, 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 laika. Tumbala, laika, shpilala, laika. Tumbala, laika, shpilala, laika. Steht auf und tragt die ganze Nacht. Wehmen zu nehmen und nicht verschämen, wehmen zu nehmen und nicht verschämen. Tumbala, 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 laika. Tumbala, 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 laika. Tumbala, laika, spielbala, laika. Tumbala, laika, spielbala, laika. Mädel, Mädel, will bei dir pflegen, Wurzeln wachsen, wachsen und regen. Wurzeln brennen und nicht durchheben, Wurzeln bänken, weinen und tränen. Tumbala, 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 laika. Tumbala, 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 laika. Tumbala, laika, shpilala, laika. Tumbala, laika, shpilala, laika. Now is your Bruder, wo darfst du pflegen? Stänken, wachsen, wachsen und regen. Liebe kann brennen und nicht durchheben. Hart kann bänken, weinen und tränen. Tumbala, 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 laika. Tumbala, 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 laika. Tumbala, laika, spielbala, laika. Tumbala, laika, spielbala, laika. Breaking into this business is like breaking into Fort Knox. Breaking out, we're talking Alcatraz. I'm a lifer. I'm 77 years old. I've been in this business. I've been in this business forever. I just can't seem to get out. Here's how crazy that really is. I have been dieting for over 65 years, while Melissa McCarthy has my career. I can tell you the exact minute the Busby Berkeley dream turned into the running quicksand nightmare. I was down in Orlando, Florida, 7 shows a week as Aldonza in Man of La Mancha at Broadway's Best Dinner Theater in Orlando, Florida. I had star billing for my favorite part in my favorite play. I was making great money. I was out in New York for the whole winter. I was in hell. Do you know that movie, Soapfish, with Sally Field?
Yeah, of course we do.
Those scenes of Kevin Kline as Willie Loman in a Florida dinner theater don't quite capture the true hideousness of that genre. I was imported from the Big Apple to authenticate the producer's claim of top New York talent. Never mind that the actual top New York talent were off in Los Angeles starring in sitcoms. I was the big draw for that production. I got the full star treatment, lodging at a Days Inn on the interstate, use of the company Pinto, a gasoline car, and every evening before the show, all I could eat at Broadway's best dinner theater buffet. I could eat a lot. My leading man, my Don Quixote, was a real piece of work. He was somewhere between 70 and dead. And an odor somewhere between Old Spice and old hamburgers. He came on to me for weeks. Oh, he woke the snoozing reptile in my DNA. And I had a few crazed method performances. I spit in his face, real spit right on stage. I slapped and kicked him for real in front of everybody. I scratched him. Once I drew blood. In 10 weeks, that was the only real pleasure I had. The overage ingenue was having an affair with the married Sancho Panza of our production, and so the cast was treated on occasion to their soprano tenor duets from a backstage utility closet during intermission. Oh God! Oh God! Oh God! Oh God! That was the only musical number the audience would actually shut up and listen to. Oh, and leaping Leonard. Leonard would jette into my room constantly, offering to do something with my crazy Afro-Jew hair. Leonard played the priest, so he had the two prettiest songs in the show, and he had the most beautiful voice in the cast. My praise endeared me to him, and he invited me to come to his house one afternoon for tea. It seemed like a good idea at the time. As I'm getting out of the car, the little house explodes like a piñata. A dozen drag queens billowed through the French doors. They peeked over paper fans, and they wiggled their lead press-on nails at me for an hour, while Leonard kept trying to corral my crazy hair and topping off my iced tea until I finally had to excuse myself to use the bathroom. The bathroom was barely large enough to turn around in, but it bespoke a clear artistic vision. A rosy marble sink, a big gilt-framed mirror, fat plastic cherubs with nail-polished pink hearts. I could feel them out there. I peed as silently as I could. I waited. I flushed. I washed and re-washed my hands. Bette Midler's whole career was based on afternoons just like this one. Carefully choreographed outside the bathroom door, they parted like a frilly Red Sea to my bewildered Moses. Leonard took my hand and waltzed me out the door. He was a beautiful, effortless dancer, the partner of my fondest dreams, Fred Astaire in a lavender tutu and point shoes. Broadway's best dinner theater in Orlando, Florida, was the first time in my life I didn't want to be in a show. Now, let's rewind. How do I get out of this? Let's rewind. No, I leave this on. How do I get it back on? Because I got something else coming up that needs it. Oh, there, okay. So, now, okay. This is entertaining, right? Okay. Now let's rewind to 30 years before that fatal realization. My earliest memory is of sitting on the stage of the Wilshire E. Bell Theater in Los Angeles, staring down at my lavender tutu. When I grew up, I would be a famous ballerina, a mouseketeer, a movie star, and a Broadway legend. As a teenager, I rode around town on the bus auditioning for anything, everything, incurring the hatred of many a psychotic young actress when, at 16, I was cast as Anne Frank. But things really heated up when I got to play Juliet. Yeah, right? After Romeo's, but soft, what light through yonder window breaks? My understudy rose from her front row seat, pointed the barrel of her father's revolver in my general direction, and tried to pick me off the rickety balcony. Fortunately, her aim was about as shaky as her mental condition. The shot took a chunk of plaster out of the top of the proscenium, and the recoil sent her backwards over the row of chairs and into Camarillo Hospital for observation. My next performance brought the press. Wouldn't you guess? A bright new star had been discovered. Now this comes. Casting directors called my house to invite me to audition. Hi, I'm Penny Orloff. Too short. Next! I sobbed for hours in the bathroom and decided my last meal would be my grandma's whole new bottle of Seconal. But it's hard to be a Broadway star from a coffin at Grauman's mortuary, so unlike my mother, I went on lots of auditions. One of those auditions led to my scholarship to Juilliard, and it was off to Lincoln Center in New York. New York City is audition central. Sometimes I would skip school to attend cattle call auditions at the Ansonia Hotel a few blocks uptown from Juilliard. The Ansonia was kind of an unofficial old actor's home. Red-wigged, red-rouged former little troopers still lugged their scrapbooks down to the lobby. Do you know that old movie, Sunshine Boys, with Walter Matthau and George Burns? That was the Ansonia. The audition consists of possibly 30 seconds or less in front of a jaded casting director who A, resents having to listen to 500 actors in a 3-day period, and B, dreads inhaling all day at the Ansonia. The other actors hate you and wish you would die. Just like you, they continue to spend a fortune on acting and singing and dancing lessons every week. And just like you, they're not going to get the part either. Hi, I'm Penny Orloff. Next! But several years of gnawing on the Big Apple, and I caught a break. G and S Soprano sought immediately for Pirates of Penzance, HMS Pinafore, other repertory, 13 weeks pay, experienced only, phone for appointment. I sprinted off to the library to get a recording and a vocal score of HMS Pinafore. Josephine's music was simple. I could learn it overnight. Then I caught sight of myself in the mirror. Boy, that that crazy Afro Jew hair. During my LA Little Theater days, I had always played foreigners, except for Anne Frank. I was always typed out for ingenue roles. It was hopeless. G and S clearly stood for Goyim and Shiksa. Nobody with such crazy Afro Jew hair was ever going to be cast. Night fell. I knew now that Busby Berkeley's dream was a cruel hoax. The promised land where a little trooper like me could make it on sheer guts and raw talent had never really existed. I had invested a whole lifetime in a black hole. So, rat poison. I lit some candles in a memorial to the career that would never be. Took a last look in the mirror at the face that would never play the palace. A trick of light from the burning candles and a silent movie seemed to flicker. Broadway audiences fell at my feet. As I blazed up the great white way, true love materialized, and we danced in each other's arms. Music up, curtain, thunderous applause. This was America, where a Jewish face with worse hair than mine rocketed to stardom after she became Paulette Goddard. That night, I dreamed I was pale and virtuous and British. And when I awoke, I was Judy and Good morning. I'm calling about your casting notice for HMS Pinafore and Pirates of Penzance. When in doubt, you gotta lie. Actually, I've just returned from 8 months as Mabel and Josephine on a Gilbert and Sullivan tour of England. Oh, thank God! Pinafore opens the day after tomorrow, and our soprano abandoned us for a tour of Oklahoma. The understudy weighs 300 pounds. What do you look like? Paulette Goddard. Really? How much do you weigh? 47 pounds. We can only pay you $200 a week, but you get your own dressing room. This was my favorite movie of all time. The whole next day, I silently sang through 50 performances of HMS Pinafore. At 4:30, I left my apartment and headed for the big time. Standing in for all the other characters, Jerry Gotham, who was the stage manager and a former Broadway dancer, he walked me through the entire show in less than half an hour. When the rest of the cast started trickling in and took their positions on stage in obviously prearranged arrangements, Jerry moved me about 4 inches to the right and told me not to move. Aye, aye, Captain. The lobby doors whooshed, and the company artistic director, William Matt Burke, lurched in. He sat himself in the middle of the 8th row and stared directly at me, still glued obediently to my little spot at center stage. I smiled and waved. He didn't blink. So I moved over to the stair and started down to introduce myself. Have you any questions before we begin, Miss Orloff? His eyes were still riveted on center stage. No, sir, I think I'm ready. His head jerked towards the sound of my voice, and he leaped up and started screaming, "Where is everybody? Where is everybody?" And he came crashing down towards the stage. By the time he got to the 3rd row, he was hopping mad. I mean, he was literally hopping on one foot. Jerry scrambled after him, holding aloft a prosthetic foot, and a round wingtip shoe. William Mount Burke was a severe diabetic who 1 year earlier had lost his eyesight and one of his feet to an insatiable sweet tooth. Google it. Most of the rehearsal was spent leading him to center stage and giving him the correct time. For the next 13 weeks, my enormous understudy and her groveling entourage of elderly church sopranos found ever more inventive ways to torment me off stage and on. The basement dressing rooms flooded ankle deep every time it rained, and mice defecated in my wigs. I endured daily contempt from Bill Mount Burke and took to leaving Hershey bars where he could smell them, the better to hasten his demise. But the audience was mine to have and to hold every time I stepped on stage, and it was worth it just to be up there in the light when the curtain opened. The showbiz part of my dream was underway. Could true love be far behind? I finished my first season at New York City Opera, having fallen like a ton of bricks for the baritone singing the Toreador in Carmen. We were both in and out of town a lot. I was doing Aldonza in Man of La Mancha productions around the country. He was starring in operas around the world, and he was married, so nothing came of it for a few years. Another autumn season began at New York City Opera, and we were singing Carmen again together, and he was divorced. By spring, we were in love, and I was in rehearsal for a brand new Broadway show. It was a $1 zillion Harold Prince spectacular. I had a great part with a great song. This role meant I would probably be nominated for a Best Supporting Actress in a musical Tony next year. My costumes fit me like skin. So I had a clause in my contract stipulating I would not gain weight. The show moved to the Amundsen Theater in Los Angeles for its 3-month pre-Broadway run. I rented a little Spanish house in a walled garden in the hills above Burbank. It was a very short walk to the big Hollywood sign. Charles drove out to stay with me for the summer. I had signed a contract saying I would not gain weight. So, my house, my rules. There would be no cooking on the premises. There would be no donuts, no potato chips, no canned SpaghettiOs. There was going to be nothing but maybe broccoli and cucumber, otherwise no food in the house. Charles seemed okay with that. We got back to New York in September, and my Tony for Best Supporting Actress in a Musical evaporated when the show closed after only 3 weeks. Now, our year-old romance slammed up against 3 months of intense negotiations about living together. After 10 years, I did not want to leave my roach-infested 5-floor walk-up hovel near the East River. He preferred the 2-bedroom sublet he had found on the Upper West Side. That was the easy part. The impassable roadblock was food, as in he would be wanting some in the house on a regular basis. We had tearful confrontations and almost broke up. And then on Christmas Eve day, a miracle. It suddenly occurred to me that I actually owned that refrigerator in the corner. I had bought it after the ancient gas model had expired years ago. the Uptown Sublet also had one. We would be a 2-refrigerator couple. That's when I learned the word house. He bought me one for Christmas. The January day we moved into our new apartment, 43 years ago this week, Charles installed the hasp on his refrigerator and headed for Zabar's Fine Foods. I was contracted to spend all of that February on another production of Man of La Mancha upstate in freezing cold Schenectady, while he starred as Tchaikovsky's Eugene Onegin for 3 weeks in Honolulu. He had opera contracts stretching 3 years into the future. I had endless auditions. One of those auditions led to 10 weeks of aversion therapy in that Man of La Mancha at Broadway's Best Dinner Theater in Orlando, Florida. I got back to New York on a bitter cold day in March, the day 3 dead bodies were dug out of a dumpster behind our apartment building. The day Charles decided the time had come for him to leave the rotten apple. He had opera contracts stretching years into the future. He could live anywhere. How could I leave? I was a little trooper. I couldn't just walk away. I auditioned for everything. Bit parts in off-Broadway turkeys, walk-ons in soap operas, soprano solos in community chorus oratorios. Then I got a second callback for Stephen Sondheim's new show, Sunday in the Park with George. I waited by the phone and never heard another word about it. Finally, his saintly patience came to an end, and Charles said, "Ken, stay if you have to, but I'm leaving. Showbiz or the die." And then a miracle. While weeping over my show programs and production photos and good reviews, I suddenly had a fleeting vision of myself 30 years from now, alone, red-wigged, red-rouged, clutching this very scrapbook in the lobby of the Ansonia Hotel. Poof, just like that, the Busby Berkeley movie starring Penny Orloff evaporated. We located our dream home in an old growth forest near Seattle. There was a pond out back with ducks and great blue herons. There were raccoons. There were deer. There were no auditions. The movers were hauling the last of our stuff down to the van when the phone rang. We made a disconnect order days ago. Stephen Sondheim wants you for Sunday in the Park with George. Rehearsals start in 2 weeks. Come on in and sign contracts. Just in the nick of time! The Busby Berkeley ending. This role meant next year's Tony Award for Best Supporting Actress in a Musical. Broadway audiences would fall at my feet as I blazed up the great white way true love would materialize. There was true love standing in the doorway. Thanks anyway. Give my regards to Broadway. In the years that followed, I aged out of Aldonza in Man of La Mancha, but I continued to dye my hair dark because you never know. The first threads of white had appeared when I was 11. I had most of a silver streak in high school and was significantly salt and pepper when I arrived at New York City Opera in 1978. Carmen had been in my first season repertory. This was a very big deal for the company hairdresser Carolina Tates of Riga, Latvia. If you would dye these ugly hairs, I would not have to wig you. So began the monthly hair coloring that went on for almost 30 years until 2005, when I was starring in my first solo show off Broadway. I cut it all off after my parents died. I had moved into their house and tended them while they circled the drain. They were really strong, and the grand finale took a long, long time. By the time my parents finally expired, 5 days apart, I had almost an inch of white grown in. I hadn't had time or inclination to do much mirror gazing while I'd been taking care of them, so I hadn't really realized what had been going on while I was otherwise occupied until about 10 days after the funerals. A bright July morning poured in through the skylight in my sister Ricky's bathroom. She had gone off to work. Towel dry my hair. What? I had a good idea. Carefully lift a slender lock of hair with my left hand and carefully cut right there at the demarcation line where black and white met. I had snipped from above the right ear forward and over some of the top of my head when I realized hours had passed. It was nearly noon. I should get dressed. I was supposed to meet my sisters for lunch. I had just enough time to get to the California Pizza Kitchen in Westlake Village. My sisters said nothing for a long moment. It dawned on me that rather than meeting my eyes, they were staring at a spot somewhere north of my eyebrow. Oh, that. When we got back to her house, Ricky completed what I had started. When she finished, my hair was just over ½ an inch long and almost completely white. In the time that followed while my hair was growing out, I find myself sometimes admiring a vaguely familiar blonde woman across the room, only to discover that was my own image in a mirror. 20 years later, it still surprises me sometimes to see this. I am astonished when I'm cast in a film, not because of my brilliance as an actor, but because the young director thinks my hair, way cinematic, man. When Beethoven died, a close friend cut a lock of his hair as a keepsake. That hair was analyzed a few years ago, and it was discovered that Beethoven had apparently ingested a lot of lead over a period of years, which would account for his chronic ill health and early death. There's the story right there. Hair is autobiography. So sometimes when that fat wannabe actress with the Afro-Jew hair rises from her grave to torment me, I'll catch an unexpected reflection in a mirror across the room, and I see the old storyteller I was born to be. Try to remember the kind of September when life was slow and oh so mellow. Try to remember the kind of September when grass was green and gray was yellow. Try to remember the kind of September when you were a tender and callow fellow. Try to remember, and if you remember, then follow, follow. Try to remember when life was so tender and no one wept except the willow. Try to remember when life was so tender and dreams were carried beside your pillow. Try to remember when life was so tender and love was an ember about to billow. Try to remember, and if you remember, then follow, follow. Deep in December, it's nice to remember, although you know the snow will follow. Deep in December, it's nice to remember without a hurt, the heart is hollow. Deep in December, it's nice to remember the fire of September that made us mellow. Deep in December, our hearts will remember and follow. Follow.